I didn't always question why I liked odd things. I just knew I did. I've always been drawn to things that feel a little bit off, a little mysterious, a little spooky. I grew up watching horror movies and shows like Unsolved Mysteries and X-Files and Beyond Belief, and reading horror like Goosebumps and Fear Street. Just being curious about things that didn't quite make sense because it never really felt scary to me. It always just felt interesting. And I think that curiosity has followed me into adulthood. The first time I started going to antique stores and oddity shops, it felt like walking into a museum. One where you are free to roam around and explore and to touch things. At first it was a little overwhelming, but I've gotten used to just taking it in one thing at a time. Nothing feels rushed in these stores. It's never about buying something just to have it. It's about looking, wondering, imagining where things came from. And I realized pretty quickly that I preferred being in those kind of spaces over places like malls or big box stores. Those places feel bright, too loud, like they're trying to tell you what to want. But antique stores and oddity shops feel quieter, like they're encouraging you to be curious instead. But even being in those spaces that I enjoy, I've noticed something. I like being in these spaces, wandering around and being an observer. But sometimes it feels like I'm the one being observed. It's not something I can explain directly. It's just a feeling, and if you know, you know. Being one of the only Black people in a space that centers collecting, displaying, and preserving, it kind of feels off. It was actually in one of those shops that I first heard about the Oddities and Curiosities Expo, and I remember being really excited about it. I went to my first one in Minneapolis last year, and I genuinely had a good time. The creativity was there, the atmosphere was really fun, but even then, I noticed something. There weren't many Black vendors, and a lot of the art and merchandise centered the same kind of views and stories, the same kind of monsters. There was a Black host during the entertainment portion, which kind of surprised me. And it made me think about how often Black people have historically existed in spaces like this as the entertainment, not necessarily as creators, not as collectors, not as observers, but as something to be looked at. This year, I went to the expo in Louisville, or Louisville, how they say it here, and the experience felt different. I was really excited to go this year, being that I had a really good time last year. But this year, I didn't feel as connected to it. I did see one black vendor, however, on my way out, which I was really excited about, but their booth was packed, so I didn't get a chance to talk to them. I did grab their card though, and I will be checking them out. And I think that's what led me to a bigger question. Why don't we see more black people in these spaces? Why does it still feel like we're on the outside of something that's rooted in creativity and curiosity? And it reminded me of a few figures that were mentioned in this book by L.L. Farmer. And this is not a history book. This is book 6 of the Warrior Slave series, which is like a historical fantasy thriller, paranormal type book. And one of the characters a couple of the characters that stayed with me, one was Joyce Heth. She was mentioned in this book quite a few times. Joyce Heth was an enslaved woman who was purchased by P.T. Barnum of, Barnum and Bailey. And she traveled with him around the country, and she was exhibited as the oldest woman in the world. P.T. Barnum claimed she was 160 years old and that she was a wet nurse for George Washington. None of that was true, but people paid to see her, to question her, to study her, and he profited off of that. Even after she died, he held a public autopsy in which he charged people to watch. Her body was publicly dissected in front of an audience. It was during this actual autopsy that the doctor refuted P.T. Barnum's claims that this woman was 160 years old. She was close to 80 or 90 years old. That kind of spectacle became sort of a modern foundation for entertainment. Then there's Sarah Bartman. She was another figure mentioned in this book, and I did some research on her, and we've all seen the picture of Sarah Bartman. She was taken from South Africa and exhibited around the world for her figure because of her body. She was put on display and examined and treated as something unusual. Even after her death, her body was preserved and displayed in a museum in Paris for like over a century, to the point where they had to write legislation in order for her body parts to be sent back to her home country. When we talk about things like curiosity, it just historically, it hasn't always been neutral. This book, which is about a pair of twin sisters who were conjoined at birth but were separated, and one kind of exhibits supernatural abilities and the other doesn't. The one that doesn't is obsessed with becoming the next Millie and Christine McCoy. And Millie and Christine McCoy were conjoined twins, black conjoined twins, who were born into slavery and who were later purchased and exhibited, I think with maybe a traveling circus or something like that. But their story is a little bit different than the others because they were actually, not to say that the others weren't intelligent, but they were actually really, really intelligent. They spoke multiple languages. They sang and danced and like really leaned into their performing capabilities. They gained control over their careers, being invited to perform all over the world, perform for very famous figures, but their lives were still shaped as being something to look at. And all of this existed within a system that was built on spectacle, on showing people something different, something other. And historically, that has always included Black bodies. And it made me think about how we are learning about ourselves more than ever now through our hobbies, through stories, and not just through formal education. I'm still learning a lot myself. So if there's any other stories or figures you think I should look into, definitely let me know. So now when I walk into these spaces, I still feel that curiosity. I still love the atmosphere, the history, the creativity, but I move through it a little differently now. I think that there's space to exist in these interests while also being aware of the history connected to them. To appreciate the strange and the beautiful without ignoring what's been overlooked. And for me going forward, that looks like being intentional about what I collect, how I decorate my space, and even the things I choose to create. Curiosity doesn't have to be passive, it can be thoughtful too. And curiosity will always have a place within me. Thanks for watching.